The car wasn't the problem. The problem was that I was the one paying for it and no one thought I'd notice. I didn't know that yet. 3 days before my birthday, my father told me to meet him at a dealership. No explanation. He never explained anything, but for once, I let myself believe it meant something good. The showroom lights were too bright, reflecting off polished metal and glass like everything inside had been designed to impress someone. I thought that someone was me. My name is Eliza Vaughn. I'm 31 years old, and I've spent most of my life learning how to expect less from my own family. Still, when I saw him standing beside a brand new sedan, one hand resting casually on the hood, something in me shifted. "Hey," I said, stepping closer. "You wanted me to?" He didn't look at me. He gestured toward the car. "This car is a well-deserved reward for your brother." I blinked, turning slightly, half expecting Nolan to be somewhere behind me. He stepped out from the other side, smiling. "Oh, you're here," he said, like this wasn't my moment at all. I looked back at my father. And what about me? It wasn't an accusation, just a question. He finally met my eyes, cold, flat, certain. "You've always been the one who understands," he said. "Nolan needs this more than you do." Something tightened in my chest. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And you'll help sign the paperwork. Your name's already on the account." The room didn't react. A salesman nearby shuffled papers. Nolan looked away. I nodded once. "Right," I said. No argument. No scene. I turned and walked out, the glass doors closing behind me like nothing had happened. A quiet note. Before the story moves forward, this is a fictional narrative created by the Revenge Pulse editorial team, inspired by familiar life dynamics and the lessons they carry, not any specific real person. If that was who I was to them, then what had I really been holding on to all this time I didn't cry on the drive home? That was new. Usually, I would replay everything, every word, every tone until I found a way to make it my fault. That was how it worked. I adjusted. I softened. I went back. This time, the silence stayed. The road stretched out in front of me, steady and empty. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Nolan. I let it ring. A second later. My mother. I flipped the phone face down. "Don't make this bigger than it is." I could already hear her voice, calm, reasonable, final. At the next red light, I picked up my phone again, but not for them. I opened my banking app, scrolled, stopped. There it was, a transaction I didn't recognize at first: large, recent, processed through a linked authorization, not a direct withdrawal. Something cleaner, structured. My fingers hovered over the screen. Authorized user. I said it quietly, like it might sound less real if I didn't give it weight. It had been set up years ago, back when I still trusted him. A joint emergency authorization. No alerts, no limits I had ever questioned. My father still had access. I kept scrolling. 2 smaller transactions. Then the main one. The amount lined up too perfectly. The car. I leaned back, the light turning green without me noticing. So, that's how. I murmured, "Not a gift. A transfer. Not his money. Mine." For a moment, I just stared at the screen, not shocked. Just tired of understanding things I was never meant to question. A horn blared behind me. I pressed the gas. At the next stop, my phone lit up again. Nolan. Then a message. "Dad said everything's locked in. Picking it up tomorrow." Locked in. I stared at the words for a second, then closed the message. I opened a different contact instead, one I had never needed before. Fraud services. The line connected faster than I expected. "Thank you for calling. How can I assist you today?" I looked at the numbers still burned into my memory. "I'd like to open an inquiry," I said. "There's a transaction on my account I didn't authorize. At home. My phone buzzed again. They thought I just needed time. If the control had never actually left me, why had I been the one acting like it did by the time I got home? The silence had changed shape. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. I set my keys down, opened my laptop, and pulled up everything I could access: statements, linked permissions, old authorizations I hadn't thought about in years. At first, it looked normal. Then it didn't. The dealership name appeared again. I leaned closer. That's not a coincidence. I clicked into the transaction details. It wasn't a direct purchase. Not in any obvious way. It had been structured through a linked authorization tied to my account. A guarantee. Not his money. Mine. I sat back slowly. So you didn't buy him a car? I said under my breath. You used my name to make it happen. The pieces lined up too cleanly. The speed of the deal, the confidence in his voice, the way Nolan hadn't questioned anything, because he didn't know. Of course he didn't. To him, it was simple. Their father had finally rewarded him. I opened older records. There it was, smaller transactions, quiet ones, nothing large enough to notice at the time, but now they formed a pattern. Testing boundaries. Seeing what I wouldn't question. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't the first time. Just the first time it was big enough to matter. I closed the laptop halfway, then stopped. No. I opened it again. Because this wasn't about a car. It was about access. About the quiet assumption that what belonged to me could be used without asking, without consequence. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Dinner tonight. We're celebrating Nolan. Celebrating. I looked back at the transaction. Then, another message: my father. It's already handled. No complications. No complications. I picked up my phone and scrolled back to the number I had just called. Fraud services. My thumb hovered, then pressed. Hi, I said when the line connected. My voice steadier now. I'd like to add more details to the case I just opened. A pause. Of course. Go ahead. I stared at the transaction one last time. If that car had been built on my authority, then was I allowed to take it back? They didn't call that night. They waited until morning. My phone lit up while I was making coffee, my mother's name glowing across the screen. I let it ring once before answering. Eliza. Her voice was soft, careful. I didn't hear from you last night. I got home late. I said, calm, steady. A pause. Then, gently, about yesterday. Let's not make things harder than they need to be. I leaned against the counter. I'm not. You know how your father is. She continued. And Nolan, he's at a point where he really needs support. There it was. I didn't interrupt. She's always been more understanding. My father's voice carried faintly in the background. Not meant for me. Still loud enough. My mother lowered her tone. You've always been strong. Eliza, you don't need things like this the way he does. I let that settle. Then I said, okay, just that. No argument, no correction. A longer pause followed. Okay, she repeated, uncertain now. I understand. I added, even controlled. Relief slipped into her voice. Good. I knew you would. Of course she did. That was the version of me they needed, the one who adjusted quietly, who absorbed everything, who made it easier for them to continue. Actually, she added, lighter now, we're having dinner tonight. Just family. To celebrate Nolan. Celebrate. I won't make it. I said. Another pause. Shorter this time. Sharper. Don't make this awkward. Eliza. I didn't answer that. I have to go. I said instead. All right. We'll talk later. Sure. I ended the call first. A message came minutes later. Nolan. Hey. About yesterday didn't mean for it to be weird. I looked at the screen, then typed back. It's fine. 3 words. Simple. Acceptable. Familiar. I set my phone down and opened my laptop again. The case number was still there. Active. They thought everything had settled. They thought I had already moved on. If they still believed I was the same person. What would happen when they realized I wasn't? I didn't wait long before calling again. This time, I was ready. Fraud services. This is Marin. The voice on the other end was calm, precise. How can I assist you? It's Eliza Vaughn. I said. I opened a case earlier. I have more information. Go ahead. I pulled the transaction up again. The purchase was routed through an authorized linkage on my account. It wasn't directly charged, but it used my financial backing. I didn't approve it. A short pause. Focused. Understood. Marin said, I'm flagging the transaction now for formal review. Something shifted. Not in the room, but in the structure everything had been built on. What happens next? I asked. We initiate a dispute process. The dealership will be contacted. They'll need to verify the authorization and documentation used. I glanced at the dealership name, picturing a conversation they weren't expecting. And if they can't, then the transaction cannot be finalized under those terms. Not delayed, not adjusted, stopped. How long does that take? It's already in motion, she said. Once a case is flagged at this level, it moves quickly, especially if there are irregularities. Irregularities. Will they be notified? I asked. If they're involved in the transaction. Yes. Of course they were. My phone buzzed. A message from Nolan. Picking it up tonight. Dad said everything's confirmed. Confirmed. I didn't respond. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the case? Marin asked. I thought for a moment. No, I said. That's everything. But it wasn't. Because this wasn't just information anymore. It was movement. A system that didn't care about explanations or intentions. Only authorization. I ended the call and closed my laptop. The case number lingered in my mind like a countdown I hadn't set but had just started. Another message came through. My father. It's already handled. No complications. I looked at the screen for a second, then set the phone down. If everything was already moving, how much time did they have before they realized by the next day? Everything looked normal. That was the strangest part. No urgency, no tension, no sign that anything had shifted. My phone buzzed mid-morning. A photo from Nolan. The car. Parked outside the dealership. Sunlight catching the hood like it was already his. Picking it up later today. He texted. You should see it in person. It's insane. I stared at the image for a moment, then locked my screen. Of course he would think that. To him, it was finished, secured, something he had already stepped into. Another message came through. My mother. Everything feels better today. She wrote. I'm glad we didn't let yesterday turn into something bigger. I almost smiled. Didn't let it turn into something bigger. As if that had been her decision. A few minutes later, another message followed. We're all meeting tonight. Dinner. Your father wants to celebrate properly. He said you should come. She added, Don't make this awkward. Like it was already decided. Like I was still part of it. Celebrate. I didn't respond. That evening, my father called. You overreacted yesterday. He said, Not harsh, just certain. But it's done now. The paperwork's clear. Nolan's picking it up tonight. Paperwork. Clear. Done. I leaned back in my chair. Okay. A pause. He was waiting for an apology. Maybe. For the version of me that made things easy. When it didn't come, he continued. This is what's best for the family. I understand. I said. And I did. Just not in the way he thought. Before he hung up. He added one more thing. There's nothing anyone can question about this. Nothing anyone can question. After the call ended, I opened my laptop again. The case status had changed. Under review to active processing. No alerts sent yet, no visible interruptions. Just a quiet system moving toward a conclusion no one else could see. They were celebrating something they believed was already theirs, planning around it, trusting it. If they were already living inside the outcome, what would happen when the outcome never arrived by the third day? They had already moved past the question of if. Now it was what next. I didn't hear it directly at first. It came in fragments, messages, half-finished thoughts, the kind of certainty people only have when they believe something is already theirs. Nolan again. Taking it out this weekend. He texted. Might drive upstate. Finally have something worth it. Something worth it. I didn't reply. A few hours later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. We're all feeling better, she said, her voice light. Your father handled everything. It's settled now. Handled everything. Settled. I listened once, then deleted it. That evening, my father texted instead of calling. It's finalized. No more issues. Let's move forward. No more issues. I stared at the words longer than I needed to. For him, that was the end of it. The last step. The confirmation that whatever had happened, whatever lines had been crossed, no longer mattered. Because the result had already been secured. Another message came through. Nolan. Registration's going through tomorrow. After that, it's officially mine. Officially. A minute later, he sent another, Dad said the paperwork's airtight. There's no way this falls through. You should see Dad. He added, he's already talking about upgrading next year. Upgrading. Like this was just the beginning. I leaned back in my chair, the room quiet around me. They weren't waiting anymore. They were planning. Trips. Routes. Weekends. A future built on something they were certain couldn't be taken away. That was the moment it felt complete. Locked. Untouchable. I set my phone aside. No corrections. No warnings. No interruptions. Just distance. Because the closer they felt to certainty, the harder the fall would be. If the one thing they trusted the most right now was already slipping out of their hands, what would they do when it was gone? It happened quietly. Not with an announcement. Not with a warning. Just a call. I didn't hear it, but I knew the moment it started. Because my phone lit up. Nolan. This time, I answered. Did you do something? His voice was tight, nothing like before. I let a second pass. What happened? A pause. Then, sharper. The dealership just called. They're saying there's an issue with the transaction. I leaned back slightly. What kind of issue they won't release the car? He snapped. Something about verification about the funding source. Verification, not delivered, not his. Did Dad talk to them? He's on his way there now, Nolan said, in the background. I could hear voices sharper now. Not controlled. Sir, we need you to step aside while we review this. Someone said. A pause. What do you mean review my father's voice tight? Unfamiliar. This transaction is under investigation. This doesn't make any sense. Everything was already approved. Approved. I closed my eyes for a moment. Okay, I said. Silence. He was waiting for an explanation. Maybe a fix. I gave him nothing. For a second, I almost said something. Almost explained. Almost fixed it. Then I didn't. I'll call you back, he muttered, and hung up. A few minutes later, my phone lit up again. My father. I let it ring. Then again, and again. Finally, a message. Call me. Now. I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop. Case status escalated. Dealership contacted. Documentation under review. I refreshed the page. A new note appeared. Authorization discrepancy. Then another update. Transaction flagged for fraud review. There it was. The exact point where everything broke. Another message came in from an unknown number. Ms. Vaughn. This is Travis from the dealership. We need to clarify some details regarding the purchase. A second message followed immediately. We cannot release a vehicle funded under disputed authorization. Of course they couldn't, because this wasn't internal anymore. This had moved outside, into a system that didn't adjust, didn't soften, didn't explain things away. I closed the laptop slowly. No shouting here, no chaos, but I could feel it building somewhere else, because without the transaction, there was no car. And without the car, there was nothing left to hold their version of the story together. When the one thing they built everything around disappeared, what would they try to hold on to next? The calls didn't stop. They just changed. By the next morning, it wasn't Nolan anymore. It was my father. 3 missed calls, then 5. Then a message that didn't sound like him at all. They're asking questions. I looked at the screen, then set it down. Of course they were. Another message followed minutes later. The bank flagged it. They're saying the authorization doesn't match. Not we need to talk. Not there's been a misunderstanding. Just facts. Stripped of control. I didn't reply. More messages came in. This is getting out of hand. You need to fix this. They're making it sound like I did something wrong. I almost smiled at that. Then another message longer this time. They're asking for documentation. He wrote. They want proof you approved it. If you can't provide it, they said it could escalate. He added, escalate. That was the word he used. There it was. The one thing he didn't have. Proof. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time. Eliza, please answer. She said, your father is under a lot of pressure. The bank, the dealership they keep calling. This is becoming serious. Becoming, as if it hadn't already been. Another message followed. We can explain this. It was never meant to be what it looks like. You know that. Do I? I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. For the first time, they weren't controlling the story. They couldn't soften it, couldn't reframe it, couldn't make it smaller. Because the questions weren't coming from inside the family anymore. They were coming from people who didn't care about intention. Only permission. Only proof. Another message appeared. Call me. This is serious. I didn't. Because this time, seriousness wasn't something he got to define, and whatever authority he thought he had left was already gone. If he couldn't decide what the truth was anymore, what did he have left to hold me in place? The calls slowed after that, not because things were resolved, but because they weren't. The dealership held their position. The bank didn't reverse the flag, and the account had been temporarily frozen pending investigation. Whatever explanation my father tried to give, it didn't change the outcome. Without the transaction, there was no car. Without the car, there was nothing left to defend. My mother called again 2 days later. Eliza, we need to talk, she said, her voice careful now. Fragile in a way I hadn't heard before. This has gone too far. I let the silence sit. It didn't have to be like this. She added, no apology, just distance from the consequences. I'm not discussing this, I said. A pause, then softer. We're still your family. I closed my eyes briefly. That hasn't changed. I replied, what I allow has. I ended the call before she could say anything else. After that, the messages changed, less frequent, shorter, uncertain. They stopped trying to explain and started trying to reach. Then, eventually, they stopped. Not because they understood, because there was nothing left to argue. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. A week later, I packed the last of my things, not in a rush, not in anger, just finished. The apartment was quiet when I closed the door behind me. No wait, no hesitation, just space. For the first time, my life wasn't shaped around what they needed or what they expected me to accept. It was mine. No conditions, no negotiations, just mine. And in that silence, one thing became clear without doubt. Without hesitation, I had never been the one who needed permission to stay. I had only been the one who forgot I could leave. This story, like all stories shared by Revenge Pulse, is a work of fiction built from familiar human experiences to reflect on boundaries, self-worth, and the quiet moments that change us. Because in real life, being strong often means people expect you to accept less, to stay quiet, to understand more than you should. But boundaries are not betrayal, they are clarity. And sometimes, walking away isn't losing anything at all. It's the first time you actually keep something that was always yours.